All right, let's talk about day two. So day two, this was a little nerdier. It's probably going to be less to talk about here, but they announced their reinforcement fine tuning research program. So, this is super technical. I don't know if I'm going to do it justice. Maybe Human, you know a little bit more about this, but the idea is that, as you train these models, you are using what's called reinforcement learning. So the model does something and you kind of swat it on the head and go, no, I don't like that. Or you give it a candy and say, yes, I like that, right? You give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And there are a whole bunch of humans who say that this answer is good, this answer is not good. And it teaches the model how to respond and what is good and what is bad. Traditionally, that's sort of done and it's locked in and you get the model you get. And everybody else can kind of nibble around the edges with some instructions and prompting. What they're doing here is they're sort of opening up another stage of tuning where if you have a large data set or a very specific domain specific, if you have a domain specific use case, you can go in there and give it more tuning and basically get O1 and the latest models to act and process your data for your use case in your domain, in your way. And you have just so much more sway over this thing. And so this is huge for people who, developers especially, but any large enterprises and really anybody up and down the chain who want to go take these models and use them in their own domains. What did you make of this, Human? And did you have any kind of other insights in terms of how this is working?
It's like the quieter one, but probably one of the more interesting releases because we can actually utilize that, right? That has been one of the deficits for us using models like OpenAI and whatnot, because what you're doing is constantly trying to be creative on prompt generation, right? The notion of, training and reinforcing is very, very, it was absent. So while I haven't had the chance to test it, I'm actually ironically the most excited about it. I've tested the SOAR capability and the Pro. My subjective experience is it's pretty amazing, the output. But I think what was really putting it over the edge is what you'd mentioned, right? Like they have this plugin style architecture where you can have your domain and you could do like healthcare specific versions of this and generating video using your context, using your content. It's almost a little of an understatement to say, call it a model. It's like almost like a platform in some ways that you can build off of.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. So just think about like a healthcare use case, right? You've got certain biological insights, you've got certain diagnostic insights, you've got, a whole bunch of stuff, and then a bunch of regulatory constraints, and you got all this stuff in your domain. And you can't just throw like O1 or ChatGPT 4 at this thing and go, there you go, run my healthcare business. It's not going to work. And so what they're saying is you can upload a whole bunch of training data and a whole bunch of information and then get it to try to answer questions. And they've actually made it so you can programmatically reinforce whether it's getting the answer right or wrong. So it's not even that you need human beings pressing thumbs up, thumbs down. You can actually program it to say these kind of answers are correct and these kind of answers are wrong, incorrect, and it'll actually sit there and learn it, teach itself. And there's a graph that shows how much better it's getting over time for your domain, for your use case. And then you basically have your own version of ChatGPT, your own version of O1. This just destroys the need to do custom models. It destroys whole bunches of startups that are doing, custom RAG stuff and custom modeling. It just undermines a whole bunch of startups and investments, and then supercharges a bunch of enterprise use cases and domain specific applications. And so it's huge. I mean, it's the nerdiest thing they announced, really for engineers and enterprises for the most part.
I think it's also for startups. So, I mean, the whole notion, I think startups that want to build serious stuff, you can build differentiation now in a way that you couldn't, right? Because as you're building a data set, you can then train the model and you have this model that's specific to you. Now, it's not quite as, I would say, elegant and separate as like I have an ML team and I have my own machine learning model in terms of the IP generation part of it, but you can again train it. So as I said, haven't had the chance to test it, but this would be the one from like my business's perspective at Collective, whether it's expense categorization or bank reconciliation, like this is the stuff that was missing that it helps us quite literally close the loop and make sure it's working because we were doing that in other ways.
You got to be careful here, right? So as a founder, you mentioned, IP generation. It's not as sexy to use this. This is analogous to Amazon Web Services and all those companies that said, no, 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 we have to build our own data center because we can't just outsource our stack to Amazon, right? That's a mistake. So for most people listening here, 99.9%, you should just be using this fine tuning thing. You should not be building your own large language model. And so, the IP, as you said, is in the way you've tuned OpenAI's models and the way you've gone about doing that in the application layer and the moats you built, distribution and so on. But yeah, don't go wasting your time building your own large language model if you can avoid it. Definitely go check that out if you are in any of those categories. A super exciting announcement. Although it is only a research program, so it's very much closed. You have to apply for this, and it's still not in general availability.